Wholesalers, it's Rob Short, Wholesaler Masterminds, and you may be thinking to yourself, Rob, you're thinking, what do you have besides this amazing podcast? And I'm so glad you asked. Wholesaler Masterminds has an assortment of product and services all designed around the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesaling. As an example, we have coaching services designed to help you power wash your practice, whether you have 2 years or 22 years. We'll offer you speaking live engagements at divisional or national sales meetings. Our scheduling service has dedicated professionals trained in the art of getting you more appointments, Wholesaler Mastermind schedulers. Our Speakers Bureau brings you amazing speakers and processes to get better return on investment out of those speakers. And finally, our partnership, our newest partnership with Allego. If you have Allego and want to get the Wholesaler Masterminds channel on your Allego platform, please let us know. Wholesaler Masterminds, happy to bring you this podcast and so much more. Wholesaler Masterminds, the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesaling. 13 years old, I was soliciting door to door for the Miami News. They put us in this van, and they take us out to lower income neighborhoods, which with circa 2018, you would never let your 13-year-old be put in a van and dropped off in a lower income neighborhood and start knocking doors. But that's what we did. And that was my first exposure to selling, was door-to-door sales. And I was just too dumb to know that there is a whole process that should be undertaken in sales. And there should be an entire composite of information around your behaviors and the materials that you use and the message that you give out. You know, I was 13 years old. I was just going on innate skill, or maybe there was no skill. I don't know. But our guest today is going to help, as we do from time to time, break down some of the very specifics of selling to make you better at it. Welcome to the only podcast on the planet dedicated to exploring the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesalers and their leaders. This is the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. I'm your host, the founder of Wholesaler Masterminds, Rob Shore. Wholesalers, welcome back to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. Nadine Keller is president of Precision Sales Coaching and Training and CEO and founder of Nimbus, a cloud-based content-rich learning, coaching, and communication platform designed to help sales organizations increase sales. She has over 25 years' experience in helping sales professionals raise their game. Throughout the 1990s, as director of sales training for the Chase Manhattan Bank, she developed an in-depth understanding of best-in-class sales and marketing behaviors, processes, and procedures. She developed, designed, and delivered numerous strategic programs that combined learning while doing and worked with very senior and demanding clients and audiences from investment banking, capital markets, operating services, asset management, and private banking. In 1998, Nadine left Chase to start her own consulting practice. Her clients today have included firms such as Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, RBS, Greenwich Capital. Her constant focus is on helping companies increase their sales effectiveness. Nadine Keller, welcome to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show.
Thank you so much, Rob. I'm so happy to be here.
It's delightful to have you here. So this body of work found its way into your book, which is called Make It About Them, Winning Sales Presentations. And I know you do a ton of work, especially in the area of final presentations in the retirement space. But this has application across the work that wholesalers do.
It absolutely does.
Yeah, and I thought the first thing we could do is take apart your whole notion of traditions versus myths. Traditions versus myths. Tell us about those. What are some of the traditions or myths that we're carrying forward with that are not serving us well at all?
Sure. Well, I think it is interesting because, from generation to generation, we pass things down. And I think one of the foundational myths, I would call, has to do with making it about them. Who is the sales meeting really about? And there's a tendency to think that sales meetings are about the products and services that the salesperson will be delivering. And when a wholesaler sets up a meeting with an advisor, the expectation, whether it be conscious or unconscious, is that it's going to be about that person telling all about their products and services, when in fact, it really needs to be about the client, about the advisor. And this is really tricky because I think that if we were to ask a lot of wholesalers, they would say that they, in fact, do make it about their clients. However, when we ask the clients on the other end, the answer is often different. And to some degree, I think this is because we've been conditioned really on both sides that the sales meeting by their nature is really about wholesalers, coming in and informing them about what they are and how they're different. But the very subtle but very, very significant difference is that it's not about the wholesaler and their products, but rather how those products and services will be able to meet the advisor's needs and their problems and their opportunities.
Okay, so wait. So we need to just stop there and just kind of pull that apart a little bit, because at a certain point when you say, it's not about you, it's about the advisor, there's a whole host of our audience out there going, yeah, Nadine, I got that one. That's kind of wholesaler sales 101. Now, if everybody had it, it wouldn't still be a problem, and it is still a problem. One of my favorite expressions that I heard one time is, it's, enough about me, let's talk about me.
Exactly.
So how do we get some meat on that bone of not making it about the wholesaler, making it about the advisor? What are the things we should be demonstrating? What are the skills we should be honing to better be able to demonstrate that we're there to serve the advisor? We're not there to throw up product.
Exactly. So I think the number one thing to always do is start with the advisor's needs. So at the beginning of the sales cycle, this is asking, them questions, getting to know them, developing insight. But it continues in every single touch point that you begin with a review of your understanding of their needs, because it will set context for everything that you are going to talk about. And as you said, Rob, everybody out there thinks that they're making it, or I should say that differently, has the intention to make it about the advisor and their clients. But it gets really tricky because, I often think about, walking into somebody's office and the advisor's leaning back with their hands clutched behind their head and their, maybe the feet on the desk with what you got kind of thing.
Sure. The what do you got?
You say that again?
The what do you got?
The what do you got, right? And our tendency is to say, oh, we got this and we got this, and we're throwing the spaghetti at the wall, hoping that something will stick. So I think one of the best ways, so one is, always to start with their needs, but one way that you can control the meeting a little bit there is, I love, and it sounds old-fashioned, but to use an agenda, particularly for that first meeting where there's a needs analysis. And it's a really simple agenda that just has the first bullet point saying, ABC advisor needs, problems, opportunities. Then the next bullet point may be, my, precision sales coaching, potential solutions. And the third bullet point is next steps. And as simple as that is, what it allows you to do is it's saying that you're in control of the meeting and we are going to start understanding it's going to be all about you, and to let the advisor know that you're going to be in a better position to tell them about what you can do for them if you understand them. Yeah. So it's really tempting to, sometimes when he asks a question to not stick with it, and that agenda can help really form almost a contract for the meeting.
Yeah, we're huge proponents of using agendas at Wholesaler Masterminds. And wholesalers, if you've read our stuff, our proponent position is you want to send them 3 to 5 days in advance of the meeting. You want to have them available to be able to pull out of your briefcase the copy of it that you've already sent via email. And you always want to use the phrase that pays in that agenda. which is if there's anything that I've neglected to mention here that you'd like to speak about or be prepared to show you, please email me back to help deflect anything that might come up in the meeting. So we're tracking together on the benefit of the agenda, and the subtle nuance that you throw in there, the very important subtle nuance, is the whole notion that when you do present an agenda, it automatically throws down the notion that you are caring about them and their time and the trajectory of the meeting. And I think those are so important messages to send out.
It is so true. And I'll tell you, so I get pushback on the agenda sometimes, and it comes in the form of, yeah, but it seems so formal. And I don't think that you need to make it formal.
What's wrong with formal? Wait. What's wrong with formal? Why do we push back on formal? Because I would say formal is also interpreted in many circles as consummate professional.
Well, I think you're right. I would definitely agree with that. But I think maybe where that's coming from is they want to develop a rapport and connection, and all of that can help it happen with an agenda and a more formal approach to the sales call.
Absolutely, and it's not mutually exclusive. You're not going in to have a backslapping glass of scotch and a metaphorical cigar. You're going in to do business. And if you want to do business in a way that others don't and separate yourself from the sea of sameness, throw down an agenda, because most people don't. Okay, get me off my soapbox, Nadine. What's the next thing we want to talk about? We want to talk about another example of myths or traditions. What about introductions? Somebody asked me who I am, what I do. There's probably a prescription for how most of us answer that. And you have some ideas about ways we should answer that maybe are a little bit more compelling in terms of our communication ability.
Absolutely. So this is so interesting to me. If you watch people introduce themselves in a meeting, there's a formula out there, and it starts with your name, and then what's next? Your title, right? Mm-hmm. And then for some reason, we feel compelled to tell people how long we've been someplace.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
In the industry or at this company or whatever it may be. And when you think about it, it's really not that meaningful to the audience. What's more meaningful to them than the title is, what is it that you will be doing for them? So I'm the person who's going to be responsible for making sure that you understand all of our capabilities. We understand your needs, whatever it may be, right? And then rather than, and I've been doing this for 25 years, some way to connect. So it may be, I love doing what I do because my career, I started as an advisor. Or it may be, I always love to come to Washington, D.C. because I graduated from Georgetown. Something that shows and displays your personality up front. So it's a really simple, very subtle change, but it's really kind of taking a look at if what we're doing in introducing ourselves, is that really servicing us?
So put those pieces together. Give me the Nadine Keller introduction. So we've just come around the room. We're in a conference room, or we've come to you. It's your time to introduce yourself. What would you say?
Great. So I would say, and I'm assuming that I would be with my clients, in which I would say, I am the person who's going to make sure that you increase your close ratios from where they are now to where they're going to be by successfully applying our process.
Awesome.
And I'm going to be here overseeing it every step of the way. And I am so thrilled to be here today because I am, in fact, a graduate of Georgetown University, and I love to come to Washington, D.C. So now I've given them an opportunity to later say to me, oh boy, I went to school in Washington as well. Or, I might say what I love about what I do is X. It's just to get them, in this is most applicable when you're going into some of the more formal sales situations where you may have a team.
Yep.
And where, people go around the table and introduce themselves and they just lose this opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you're just presenting that extra piece of connective tissue that name, rank, serial number just doesn't ever present.
Correct.
Yeah. What are some other myths or traditions that you have tucked up your sleeve for today?
Or, well, another one is around the topic of jargon. And if I were to call that a myth, I would say that the myth is that jargon makes us sound smarter somehow. And I believe that it does, particularly early in our careers, but as we advance, we know that jargon from research that people who use jargon are considered to be less trustworthy. We also know that if you're using words that are not necessarily, they may be understood, but if they're not necessarily a part of the everyday vernacular of the people that you're talking with, they need to come out of their listening for a minute to think about it, right?
They get hung up on that word.
Say that again?
They get hung up on that word. They stall on that word.
Exactly. They stall, and then they're not quite where they were beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
So this gets really tricky in financial services, and when we're talking wholesalers and advisors, because of course they swim in a land of jargon and they know each other's jargon for the most part. However, there is jargon that is specific to your organization, for example.
Acronyms as an example.
Say acronyms,
Yep.
Absolutely are jargon, right? Titles are jargon. There is, God knows, there is so much jargon in our industry. And what's interesting to me is when I think about advisors, they are often talking to people that may not be as sophisticated from a financial perspective as they are. And so we want to make sure that anything that we say is easily translatable to their audience.
Sure. So let's parse that a little bit further.
Does that make sense?
Well, it does, but I think we have to go a little bit deeper to harvest some of your knowledge around this. In other words, you've acknowledged, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, as you said, we swim in this sea of jargon here in our financial services world. It's chock full of it every single day. You can't get away from it. So how do I decide where I draw the line between going overboard on jargon, having just the right amount of jargon? Now, one of the things you said was when you're younger in your career, jargon can help bolster the reality or the impression that you're more knowledgeable than you may actually be. So that's not a bad thing. But at a certain point, how do I even know that I've gone off the jargon deep end, if you will?
Well, I think it requires a real discipline and in becoming very conscious about the jargon that we use. What is jargon that's specific to your firm, for example? What is one of the, I'm thinking about a story a couple of years ago. I was working and we were doing some training around a guaranteed income product. And we were teaching people how to sell it to employees. Basically, it was an in-plan income guarantee. And if God knows, there is so much jargon associated with that. It'll make your head spin. So one of the things that I did is I had a teenage boy at home at the time, and I had him look at all of the training materials we were doing, because we were teaching, how to sell this, and ask him, what are you not familiar with? Like, what language are you getting stuck on? And sometimes you need to go to that extreme to figure out, what the jargon is, because we're swimming in these waters of jargon so much that we don't even recognize it. And what's interesting about, I also think with that guaranteed income story, it was interesting. We did an exercise and it was around features and benefits. And I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. Features or facts about a product, benefits are kind of the so what's the advantage of it, et cetera. And I asked the group, one side of the room, to write down the features of guaranteed income, and the other side write down the benefits. And on both flip charts, was the term guaranteed income. So I thought and asked the group, so is guaranteed income a feature or is it a benefit? Well, the reality is it's both, because it's the guaranteed income is the way that it's structured. And on the benefit side, it's kind of like, who wouldn't want guaranteed income?
Mm-hmm.
But guaranteed income as a term is not a compelling term.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to get people thinking about what I call 3 o'clock in the morning language. And that is, if you're like me, there are those nights that you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? And you start thinking, and you can't get back to sleep. And one of the reasons why you can't get back to sleep is because whatever you're thinking about has an emotional component to it.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine that anybody would be waking up in the middle of the night thinking, oh, gee, I wish I had guaranteed income. What they're more likely to be waking up and saying is things like, oh, God, I don't want to be a burden to my children,
Yep.
or I don't want to run out of money in my retirement. It's those kinds of terms that are just much more compelling.
Yep.
And this even goes with advisors, right? Even when we're in the world of where there is all of this jargon that we're using all the time, and just even general corporate jargon, whether it's alleviate administrative burden. Who is waking up in the middle of the night thinking they want to alleviate their administrative burden?
Right.
Probably not, right? They want to get stuff off their plate. So I'm just a real proponent of, speaking in plain old English, and, in communicating in a way that people can connect with.
Yes. So let's cover one more before we have to go. And this one is a little bit tricky because it has to do with what you present and how you present. And by that, I mean, it's not what physically comes out of your mouth, but it's the tools that you use to support whatever product or concept you're speaking about. And the reason I say it's tricky is for so many wholesalers, you can't do this on your own. You got to take what the marketing department gives you. The story I just want to offer with this that some of the wholesalers will have seen on the website is the time that I was doing an event with a group of advisors, and it was kind of a cavalcade of wholesalers from different firms. So, the audience is wholesalers, or the audience is advisors from different firms, and the presenters were 8 different wholesalers from different firms, all with different topics, all value-add topics. And one of the advisors took me outside. He would have taken me by the woodshed if he could, and he basically said, "You know what? I'm 45 years old, pushing 50." And I can't see a damn thing on the screen. I'm leaving. and it was like, ouch. And I passed that along to the organizers because it wasn't my fault, but it was I was embarrassed for them, and I felt bad for the advisor, and I certainly felt bad for the wholesaler because somebody sent them into battle with this crap. So it happens every single day. So let's just touch on the highlights of if you had the marketing department or the Salesforce marketing department in front of you, what would you be telling them to do so wholesalers do not get that kind of reaction from the advisors in their support material?
Right. So I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation where somebody, and even when the marketing, when, you've got a lot of flexibility, where, somebody comes in and says, oh, I got the presentation from 30 slides down to 13. And basically what they've done is they've taken all the content and put it in the 13 slides.
They lowered the point type down to 10, and they were
exactly.
Yeah.
And then you've got the eye chart, and it's crazy. And it used to be that, there were all sorts of rules. Like I remember one that was one message to a slide and 7 bullet points, and 8 words to a bullet point. And it's all of that where the whole death by PowerPoint comes from.
Yep.
And why, in many cases, when I think about it, we've been boring each other for years in some of these presentations. So the first thing I would say, and it tends to be very controversial, the more slides, the better. So the myth is the fewer the slides, the better. I go so far as to say the more slides, the better. And the reason for this is when you think about the world that we're living in today, it's so much, faster paced. attention spans are so much shorter than they ever were. And often I'm going into these organizations and I'm seeing PowerPoint presentations that look exactly like the presentations of the 90s. They haven't changed much at all with all the bullet points, etc. We need, and we are fighting against the attention span issue here. And so what I love to do is use slides with very little text on them, lots of image, and to use a lot of them almost like it's illustrating my story.
Yep.
So that what happens is that when your audience is listening to you, number one, they're able to connect with you because people will read before they listen. And if you don't have a lot of text up there, they're going to be connecting with you, which is what we want.
Yep.
And then when their listening does go out, and everybody does from time to time, they can ground themselves in kind of the one line and get back on track. And it just makes for a much more interesting presentation.
Wholesalers, the book is Make It All About Them, Winning Sales Presentations. We'll link that up in the show notes. Nadine Keller, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Rob.
Wholesalers, come back next time for another episode of the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. You'll find all of our content at wholesalermasterminds.com, and the podcast can be found at iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.